The outpost on Orin 7 stood like a lonely fortress at the edge of known space. It was not a grand city or a shining colony. It was a collection of gray structures, low domes, and long corridors that hummed with machines. Around it stretched wide deserts of red sand, broken only by sharp black rocks and the blue glow of twin moons at night. Few came here by choice. Most who lived here were assigned by duty or driven by need. Kai, a young human engineer, walked the halls each day with tools on his belt and grease on his hands. His job was to keep the generators alive, to fix broken doors, and to stop the endless leaks of old pipes. The outpost had been built in haste, and it showed in every loose panel and every flickering light. Some people hated the work. Kai did not mind. He liked machines because they were honest. If something was broken, he could see it. If something was fixed, he knew it. There was no guessing with machines. Life on Orin 7 was quiet but never truly calm. The outpost was home to many kinds of beings. Humans were only a small group here. The rest were allies and traders from other worlds. There were tall, blue-skinned Volari who spoke in deep tones like rolling thunder. There were sharp-eyed carrions with long tails who climbed walls with ease. There were the stoic Rin who spoke little but were known for their steady strength. Together they lived and worked, sometimes as friends, sometimes with distance. Among all of them, one figure stood apart. Her name was Mira. She was a pilot, and though she often wore the same gray uniform as the rest, she never seemed to belong to any group. She moved through the halls with her helmet on, the black visor hiding her face. She spoke little. She ate alone. When gatherings were held in the mess hall, she sat at the edge of the room or left quickly after finishing her food. Kai had noticed her many times. At first, he thought she was simply shy. Later, he wondered if she was hiding something more. The others whispered about her. Some said she had no interest in friends. Some claimed she thought herself better than the rest. A few suggested she was not even human at all, that she only wore the suit to cover her true form. Kai did not believe such tales, but he did see that she carried a kind of wall around her and no one dared to cross it. One evening, Kai finished repairing a power conduit and walked to the mess hall. The smell of food was strong. Spiced roots from Volari cooks, thick bread from human rations, and roasted grains favored by the carrions. Voices filled the space as groups sat together at long tables. Laughter echoed as the carrions made jokes, their tails flicking in rhythm. The Rin sat quietly, eating in steady silence. At the far end of the hall, Mira sat alone, her helmet still on, her plate untouched for a long while. Kai paused. He could take his food and sit with other humans. He could pretend not to notice her, as most did. Yet something in her stillness drew his eye. She looked not just alone, but almost invisible, as if the crowd moved around her without truly seeing her. For a moment, he thought about walking to her table, but before he could, she rose, left her tray half full, and walked out of the hall without a word. Later that night, Kai lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling as the hum of generators filled the silence. He thought of Mira again. He wondered why she kept the helmet on, why she never laughed, why she left before anyone could approach. He told himself it was none of his business. Still, something in him wanted to understand. The next day brought new problems. One of the patrol shuttles had broken down in the hangar. Kai was called to repair it. When he arrived, he found Mira already there. She was seated on the wing, her helmet still in place, tools spread around her like pieces of a puzzle. She did not look up when Kai approached. "This one is stubborn," she said at last, her voice muffled by the visor. "The engine refuses to sync." Kai set down his own tools and climbed onto the craft. He checked the panels, wires, and fuel lines. He worked beside her in silence for a while. She was skilled, quick with her hands and precise with her words when she gave a short report on the problem. Yet even as she spoke, her tone carried no warmth. It was the voice of someone used to being ignored. After hours of work, the engine finally hummed to life. The shuttle shook slightly, then settled into a steady rhythm. Mira touched the controls, then leaned back as if releasing a long-held breath. "Good work," Kai said with a smile. She gave a small nod. "It will hold now." Kai hesitated before speaking again. "You spend a lot of time alone." Her helmet tilted toward him, though the visor hid her expression. "That is easier," she said. "Easier than what?" "Easier than being someone they do not see," she replied, her voice soft but firm. Kai wanted to ask more, but she turned away, gathering her tools and walking out of the hangar. He stood there, thinking about her words. Easier than being someone they do not see. Days passed. Work continued. The outpost never slept. Supply ships came and went. Patrols searched the skies for any sign of danger. In the middle of this, Kai often found himself watching for Mira. He saw her moving through the corridors, silent as ever. He saw her in the mess hall sitting alone. He saw her in the hangar, where she seemed most alive, surrounded by the machines she trusted. The whispers about her never stopped. Some said she had no heart. Others said she was waiting for orders from a secret commander. A few said she was dangerous. Kai ignored them all. He remembered her words. They did not see her. That was the truth of it. One night a storm swept across Orin 7. The winds howled over the desert and the outpost shook under the force. Sand filled the air and the sky burned with flashes of electric light. Many gathered in the common hall, watching the storm through thick glass panels. Mira was not there. Kai looked for her and found her outside in the hangar. "Checking the ships, you should be inside," Kai called out over the roar of the wind. She turned, her helmet glowing faintly under the storm's light. "The ships matter more than my comfort," she said. "Maybe so," Kai replied, stepping closer. "But you matter too." For a moment she stood still. The storm raged behind her, but in that moment the noise seemed to fade. She looked at him through the visor, and though he could not see her face, he felt the weight of her silence. Then she turned back to the shuttle, her hands steady as she checked the panels again. Kai did not press her further, but he knew then that Mira was not cold or distant by choice. She was waiting for something, perhaps for someone to look past the helmet, past the uniform, past the walls she had built. In the quiet hours after the storm, Kai walked the corridors again. He thought of Mira's words, her silence, and the way she stood against the wind. The outpost on Orin 7 was filled with many kinds of people, but none as mysterious as her. And though he did not yet know how, Kai felt certain that one day he would find a way to reach her. The storm passed, but its echo lingered in the minds of those who lived on Orin 7. The desert air felt sharper, the halls colder. Life went on as always, with patrols launched, machines repaired, and supplies checked. Yet for Kai, something had changed. He could not forget the sight of Mira standing against the storm, her voice quiet but steady, saying the ships mattered more than her comfort. He began to notice her more than before. Not just in passing, not just as a silent figure with a hidden face, but as a person whose silence carried weight. When she entered the hangar, she carried herself with calm focus. When she sat in the mess hall, she gave no sign of hearing the laughter around her. She moved like a shadow that wished not to be seen. One afternoon, Kai was called again to the hangar. A supply shuttle had returned damaged from patrol. Its right wing was bent and the control lines were fried. When he arrived, Mira was already there, helmet in place, crouched beside the ship with tools scattered on the ground. "You again," Kai said, setting down his own kit. "Work needs doing," she answered simply. For hours they worked side by side. The heat of the hangar pressed down, the smell of fuel sharp in the air. Mira's hands moved quickly and Kai matched her pace. They passed tools back and forth with few words. At last, as the sun dipped behind the desert cliffs, the shuttle gave a low hum, its systems alive again. Mira stood, wiping her gloves, and for a moment Kai thought she would leave as always. But instead she turned toward him and spoke in a softer voice. "You ask too many questions," she said. Kai blinked. "I have not asked anything yet." "You want to," she said. "I can see it in your eyes. You want to know why I stay silent, why I keep this helmet on, why I walk apart from the rest?" He did not deny it. "Maybe I do. Because you are here like the rest of us, but it feels like you are far away. I wonder why." Mira stood still, her visor dark. Then with slow hands she touched the side of her helmet. The locks hissed and the visor lifted. For the first time Kai saw her face. Her skin was pale from long hours beneath armor, her eyes sharp yet tired. She was younger than he expected, but her gaze carried years of weight. A lock of dark hair slipped free as she pulled the helmet fully away. "No one asks me that," she said at last. "They whisper. They assume. But no one asks." Kai watched her, unsure if she wanted silence or reply. Mira drew in a slow breath. "I came here as a pilot. Skilled, tested, trained. That is what they wanted. But once I arrived, they only saw the uniform. They only saw the fighter, the one who flew through storms and returned without fear. I am not seen as more than that. To them I am only a pilot, only a soldier, nothing else. Her voice lowered. No one sees me as a woman. They see a function, a machine to be used. So I wear the helmet. It is easier that way. Kai felt the weight of her words. They were not spoken in anger. They were spoken in quiet truth, shaped by years of being overlooked. He wanted to answer, but for a moment no words came. At last he said, "I see you." Mira's eyes met his. There was no smile, but there was a shift in her gaze, a flicker like light behind a cloud. She placed the helmet back under her arm and turned toward the shuttle. "Do not waste your sight on me," she said, though her tone carried less distance than before. "You have your own path. I have mine." The days that followed carried a subtle change. Mira no longer always kept her helmet sealed. Sometimes in the hangar she set it aside while she worked, her hair loose around her face. Sometimes in the mess hall she lifted her visor to eat, though still apart from the others. And sometimes, though rare, her eyes found Kai across the room as if checking whether he truly still saw her. One evening, a gathering was called in the main dome. It was rare for the outpost to hold such things. The command wanted to lift spirits after the storm. Lanterns glowed against the steel walls. Music drifted from speakers and voices filled the air with cautious joy. Many came, both human and alien, sitting together at long tables. Kai stood near the edge, unsure if he should join the laughter or remain apart. Then he saw Mira. She was seated in a corner, her helmet on the bench beside her, untouched. She held a cup of water, her eyes fixed on the floor. Around her, no one spoke. It was as if she were invisible again. Kai's steps carried him forward before he fully chose them. He crossed the room, each movement drawing eyes. He stopped before her table. Mira looked up, surprised. "May I sit?" he asked. She gave a small nod. For a time they sat in silence, music and laughter around them. Then Mira spoke, her words quiet enough for only him to hear. "I told you once, no one sees me." "That has not changed." Kai looked at her, then at the crowded dome. "I see you now, and maybe that can change something." Her eyes searched his face. For the first time she looked uncertain. Her voice trembled, though it was soft. "You do not know what you ask. It is easier for me to be unseen." "Easier is not always better," Kai said. "Sometimes the harder path is the one worth walking." The music grew louder. A few pairs began to move in slow steps across the dome floor. It was not formal dancing, only simple movement, but it brought smiles and cheers. Mira watched them, her face unreadable. Kai rose, held out his hand, and asked, "Would you dance with me?" Mira froze. Her breath caught. For a long moment she did not move. "No one has ever asked me that," she whispered. "I am asking now," Kai said, his hand steady. The dome seemed to grow quiet around them. Aliens and humans alike turned their eyes toward the corner. Some whispered, surprised. Others waited, curious. Mira sat with her hand on the table, staring at Kai's outstretched hand. Her heart beat fast, though she tried not to show it. She had fought storms, flown through fire, faced dangers in the void. Yet this simple request struck deeper than all of those. At last, with slow movements, she placed her hand in his. Kai smiled, helping her to her feet. The music swelled, and together they stepped onto the floor. The outpost of Orin 7 had seen battles and storms, silence and shadows. But that night, for the first time, it saw Mira not as a pilot, not as a soldier, but as herself. And for Mira, though the night was only beginning, a new path had already opened. The night in the dome ended with quiet murmurs. Some smiled at the sight of Mira dancing. Others whispered in surprise, and a few shook their heads in disbelief. But no one could deny that something had changed. For the first time, Mira had stepped out of the shadows. She had let herself be seen. When the music faded, she returned to her seat, her face calm but her heart racing. Kai thanked her with a gentle nod, not pressing her with words. They sat for a short while before Mira left, carrying her helmet under her arm. The others parted as she passed, watching in silence. That single dance was a moment none of them would forget. In the days that followed, life on Orin 7 returned to routine. Patrols flew out into the sky, machines broke and were fixed, and supply lists grew longer than they should have. Yet beneath the rhythm of work, a new current stirred. People spoke of Mira not as a ghost in a helmet, but as someone who had shared a dance under the lanterns. Even those who had once whispered against her began to soften their words. Mira noticed the change, though she did not always trust it. She still worked alone, still ate quietly, but the walls around her no longer felt as thick. She carried herself differently. When someone greeted her in the hall, she returned the nod. When the Carians cracked a joke near her, she allowed herself the smallest smile. These were small steps, but they mattered. For Kai, the memory of the dance lingered. He did not think himself brave for asking, only honest. He had seen her loneliness and he had acted. Yet each time he passed her in the hangar, he felt a spark of pride at the way she now met his eyes. He wondered what else could change if she allowed herself to be seen more fully. One afternoon, a meeting was called in the command dome. Officers from each species gathered around the round table, the central display glowing with maps of the desert and the skies above. Reports had come in of strange movements beyond the ridge, lights at night, signals that did not match any known ally. The commander, a tall Rin with a steady voice, spoke to the group. There may be raiders moving near our borders. We must strengthen patrols. No ship flies alone. Pairs only. Mira sat among the pilots, her arms crossed, her face set. For years she had flown alone. It was the way she worked best, her focus unbroken by chatter. Now she was being told she must take a partner. When the list of pairs was read, her name was spoken alongside one other. Kai. The room turned, surprised. Mira raised her eyes and Kai's heart quickened. He was no pilot, only an engineer, but he was skilled with systems and could serve as co-pilot in need. The commander continued without pause, making the choice final. After the meeting, Mira caught him in the corridor. Why you? She asked, her voice low. Orders, Kai answered with a small shrug. Looks like we are a team. She studied him for a long moment. Do not slow me down. I will try not to, he said with a half smile. Their first flight together came at dawn. The sky above Orin 7 was painted in shades of red and gold, the twin moons fading into pale light. Mira guided the shuttle with steady hands, her eyes sharp on the horizon. Kai sat beside her, checking systems, running scans, speaking only when needed. For a while, silence filled the cockpit. Then Mira spoke. When you asked me to dance, I thought you were making a joke. I was not, Kai said. I know that now, she replied softly. But I did not understand why you would ask. No one has ever looked at me that way, not as a woman, only as a fighter. Kai turned toward her. I asked because I wanted to. Because I saw you, not the armor. She gripped the controls tighter, her voice quiet. It frightened me, did it? Yes, because I did not know what to do with it. They flew in silence again, the hum of the engines filling the space. Outside, the desert stretched endless, broken only by cliffs and canyons. The scanners beeped with faint signals, traces of movement near the horizon. Mira adjusted course, her eyes narrowing. There, she said, pointing to a cluster of lights moving across the sand. Kai checked the screen. Not one of ours. They moved too fast. Mira pressed the throttle and the shuttle surged forward. The unknown craft came into view. Small raider skiffs, dark metal against the bright desert, armed with crude weapons but quick and agile. This is why we patrol, Mira said, her voice calm. They test us, see if we are weak. The raiders turned as they spotted the patrol shuttle. Shots lit the air, streaks of fire cutting across the sky. Mira rolled the ship sharply, engines roaring. Kai gripped the console, scanning for weaknesses. Shields holding, he said. But they are circling fast. Mira's eyes flashed with focus. Then we outfly them. The shuttle dove low, skimming the cliffs, sand whipping in streams behind. Mira's hands moved with precision. Every motion smooth, every choice sharp. Kai fed her updates, calling out weapon charges and shield drops. Together they moved as one, pilot and co-pilot, each step relying on the other. One raider skiff broke formation, diving at them from above. On our tail, Kai warned. I see it, Mira said. She pulled the shuttle into a steep climb, then cut power suddenly. The raider shot past, caught off guard. Mira fired, and the skiff exploded in a burst of fire. Kai's breath caught, but Mira was steady, her face calm as stone. The others pulled back, their formation breaking. Soon the sky was clear again, silence returning as the last signals vanished beyond the ridge. Kai leaned back, heart still racing. You fly like no one I have ever seen. Mira glanced at him, and for a moment her eyes softened. And you kept pace. Not bad for an engineer. They returned to the outpost as the sun set. Word spread quickly of the encounter, and once again Mira was spoken of, but this time not as a shadow or a ghost. She was spoken of as a leader, a fighter who had defended the outpost with skill, and standing beside her in every story was Kai, the human who had flown with her. That night Mira sat alone in the hangar, helmet beside her. Kai found her there, working on the shuttle as always. "You did well today," he said. She did not look up. "You too," he stepped closer. "You are seen now, Mira, not just as a soldier. As more," she paused, setting down her tool. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "I do not know if I am ready for that. But when you asked me to dance and when you stood beside me today, I felt it. I was more than just what they said I was. I was myself," Kai nodded. "That is all I wanted you to know." For a long moment they sat in silence, the hum of the shuttle filling the air. Then Mira looked at him, her eyes clear. "Do not leave my side, Kai. If I must be seen, let it be with you near." He smiled, steady and certain. "Then near I will stay." The outpost on Oran 7 had faced storms and raiders, silence and shadows. But in the bond forming between a quiet pilot and a stubborn engineer, something greater was taking shape. It was not only strength that held the outpost together. It was the courage to see one another, truly and fully, even when no one else did. The next weeks on Oran 7 passed with a rhythm both steady and tense. Patrols flew daily, the desert watched carefully, and repairs never ended. The raider threat had not vanished, only pulled back to wait for another chance. Yet within the outpost, talk did not fade about the strange partnership of Mira and Kai. The story of their patrol spread like fire through dry grass. Some told of Mira's flying, sharper and faster than the desert winds. Others told of Kai, who had no wings of his own but stood steady as her co-pilot. And among the whispers was another memory, older now but not forgotten: the night of the dance. Many who once looked past Mira began to greet her. A nod in the corridor, a word in the hangar, even a small laugh shared in the mess hall. She answered carefully, not with warmth but with a calm presence. Step by step the wall around her thinned. Kai noticed the change most of all. She no longer always wore the helmet. She sometimes sat at his table in the mess hall. When he spoke, she met his eyes instead of turning away. These were small things, but to Kai they meant the world. One night, as the sky turned dark, the commander called another gathering. Not for battle, not for orders, but for rest. The outpost had survived storms and raiders. Spirits needed lifting, so lanterns were lit again in the central dome, and music echoed through the steel walls. The crowd gathered slowly. The Volari sang low songs that rolled like thunder. The Carrions moved with light steps, tails flicking in rhythm. The Rin watched with steady calm, their deep voices adding to the harmony. Humans added their own notes, and together the sound rose like a single voice beneath the stars. Kai entered the dome and found Mira standing near the edge. Her helmet rested under her arm, her hair falling freely across her shoulders. She wore the same uniform as always, but in the glow of the lantern she seemed changed, less a soldier, more herself. "You came," Kai said as he reached her side. "I came because you would not let me hide," she replied. Her voice held no bitterness, only truth. The music grew stronger. Some began to step onto the floor, moving together in simple dances. The crowd cheered softly, clapping hands in time. Mira watched, her face calm but her eyes uncertain. Kai turned to her, his heart steady. "Would you dance again?" Mira's breath caught. For a moment she stood still, her gaze fixed on him. Then she spoke softly. "They are all watching." "Let them," Kai said. "They will not see a soldier tonight. They will see you." She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them with a spark of resolve. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. They stepped onto the floor together. The music wrapped around them, soft at first, then rising. Mira moved with careful grace, her steps unsure but growing steady with each beat. Kai guided gently, never pulling, only offering his hand and his trust. At first, whispers spread through the crowd. Mira, the silent pilot, the shadow in a helmet, was dancing again. But soon the whispers faded, replaced by quiet awe. She moved not as a fighter bound by duty, but as a woman free to be herself. Her eyes lit with a glow no visor could hide. Her smile faint but real. The lanterns shimmered above, and beyond the dome the twin moons rose high. Through the wide glass panels, the desert stretched endless in silver under the night sky. To many it seemed as if the stars themselves paused to watch. Kai felt the weight of that moment. He had seen Mira fight storms and raiders, but this was different. Here she was not a warrior. She was simply Mira, and she was seen. When the music slowed, they stepped apart, but Kai did not release her hand. She looked at him, her face calm yet filled with something new. "They saw me," she whispered. "Yes," Kai said, "and they will remember." The crowd clapped softly, not with mockery but with respect. Even the Rin bowed their heads, and the Volari let out a low note of approval. Mira's cheeks warmed, though she stood tall. For the first time since arriving on Orin 7, she felt no need to hide. After the gathering ended, Mira and Kai walked together through the quiet halls. The outpost hummed with the steady pulse of machines. The desert wind brushed against the walls. "I feared this," Mira admitted as they walked. "To be seen. To be known." "It made me feel weak," Kai shook his head. "It makes you strong. Stronger than before. Anyone can fly through fire. Not everyone can open their heart." She stopped, looking at him. Her voice was low but steady. "You ask me to walk a path I have never walked. To let go of the armor. To trust that I will not vanish if they see me as more." Kai met her eyes. "You will not vanish. You will shine brighter." They stood in silence for a while, then Mira spoke again. "If the raiders return, I will fight. That is who I am. But when the battle ends, I will still be here. Not only a pilot. Not only a soldier. I will be Mira." Kai smiled. "And I will stand beside you." The days that followed carried the memory of that night like a flame. In the hangar, in the mess hall, in the corridors, Mira was greeted with respect, not whispers. Her fellow pilots began to speak with her not only of missions but of small things. The taste of food, the feel of the desert wind, the sight of the moons. She answered carefully, but she answered. Step by step, she was no longer invisible. Yet outside the walls of the outpost, danger still brewed. Signals came again of raider movement, stronger this time, more organized. The commander warned the crews to prepare. Patrols doubled, weapons sharpened, shields reinforced. Everyone knew that soon the test would come. Mira stood in the hangar one evening, her hand resting on the shuttle's wing. She looked up at the stars beyond the dome. Once she had felt alone beneath them. Now as Kai approached and stood at her side, she felt the weight lift. "They will come again," she said quietly. "Yes," Kai replied, "and we will be ready." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "Promise me one thing. What is it?" "If I fall, do not let them forget me as a soldier only. Let them remember the woman who danced." Kai placed his hand over hers on the shuttle wing. His voice was firm. "You will not fall, and they already remember, but I promise." The stars shone bright above Orin 7 and the desert stretched silent below. Within the outpost, strength gathered not only in weapons, but in the bond between two souls who had chosen to see each other fully. The raiders would come, but when they did, they would find more than fighters waiting. They would find a people who had learned that courage was not only in battle, but in the simple act of being seen. The warning came at dawn. Alarms echoed through the outpost, sharp and urgent. The desert sky glowed with fire as raider ships broke from the horizon, more than before, faster and better armed. Their engines roared like beasts hunting prey. Mira ran to the hangar, her steps quick but steady. Kai was already there, strapping into his seat. The shuttle hummed with power, ready for flight. Around them, other pilots rushed to their own ships. The outpost shook as defenses came alive. "This is it," Kai said as Mira climbed into the cockpit. She tightened her harness, eyes sharp. "Then we meet them head-on." The shuttle roared into the sky. Dust rose behind as they climbed into open air. The desert stretched wide below, but ahead the raiders closed in like a storm of steel. The outpost fighters formed lines, each pair ready to strike. Mira's hands moved with calm speed on the controls. Kai checked the scanners, calling out targets. The first clash came fast. Raiders swept in, firing bright streaks across the sky. Mira rolled the shuttle through the fire, engines screaming. Kai locked weapons, sending bursts into the enemy line. One raider exploded, flames scattering across the air. "They are pressing hard," Kai said. "Then we press harder," Mira replied. She pulled the shuttle into a dive, weaving through the cliffs. Raiders chased, but her flying was sharper than the wind itself. Kai guided her with data, his voice steady, his hands quick on the systems. Together they struck again, two ships falling to their fire. All across the sky the battle raged. Fighters burned, shields cracked, and voices filled the comms with shouts of warning and resolve. Mira's eyes never wavered. She moved with fierce grace as if the dance she had shared now flowed into the fight. Her ship was not only a weapon, it was an extension of her will, and she wove it through fire like a blade of light. At the height of the clash, a raider cruiser rose from behind the ridge. It was larger, armored, its weapons stronger than the rest. The sight of it shook the line. Some ships pulled back, shields failing under its blasts. Kai scanned quickly. That cruiser will tear us apart if we leave it standing. Mira's jaw tightened. Then we strike at its heart. She pushed the shuttle forward, straight toward the massive ship. Raiders swarmed to block them, but Mira cut through, rolling and climbing, each move daring and precise. Kai fired at the swarm, clearing their path. The cruiser loomed closer, its guns flashing bright. "Kai," Mira said, her voice calm despite the fire around them. "If I fall, remember what I told you." "You will not fall," Kai answered, his tone steady. "Not today." They broke through the last line of raiders. The cruiser's shields flared as Mira lined up the shot. Kai overloaded the weapons, the controls burning under his hands. "Now," he said. Mira pressed the trigger. The shuttle shook as light burst from its guns, striking the cruiser's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the great ship cracked, fire spilling from its sides, and with a roar it exploded, breaking apart across the sky. Cheers rose through the comms. The raiders scattered, their lines broken, their courage lost. One by one they turned and fled beyond the horizon. Silence followed, broken only by the hum of engines and the crackle of fire in the distance. Mira guided the shuttle back toward the outpost, her breath heavy but her hands steady. Kai sat beside her, his chest rising with relief. When they landed, the hangar filled with voices. Pilots and engineers gathered, their cheers rising higher than the alarms. They called Mira's name with respect, not whispers. They called Kai's name as well, the human who had stood by her side. Mira stepped from the shuttle, her helmet in her hand, but not on her head. She faced the crowd, her eyes clear. For the first time, she did not shrink from their gaze. She let them see her fully, not just a pilot, not just a soldier. Kai moved beside her. Their eyes met, and he gave her a small nod. She returned it, a faint smile touching her lips. Later, when the hangar grew quiet, Mira sat with Kai on the wing of the shuttle. The night was calm, the twin moons bright above. The desert stretched endless in silver. "They see me now," she said softly. "Yes," Kai replied, "and they always will." She looked at him, her voice gentle but firm. "But it began when you asked me to dance. That was the first time I felt seen." Kai smiled. "Then I am glad I asked." Mira leaned back, her gaze lifting to the stars. "I am not afraid anymore. Not of storms. Not of battles. Not of being seen. I will carry that with me." And so in the quiet after fire and storm, Mira found her beginning anew. She was no longer the shadow in the helmet, no longer the pilot hidden behind whispers. She was Mira, seen and known. And with Kai beside her, the stars above Orin 7 no longer felt distant. They felt like a path waiting to be walked.